Britain had never lost a pitched battle to an African army, not once, in 200 years of colonial warfare across an entire continent. January 22nd, 1879, Isandlwana, in what is now South Africa. A British force of 1,800 men, regulars, veterans, men who had fought in campaigns across 3 continents, had made camp at the base of a distinctive sphinx-shaped mountain. They had rifles, they had artillery, they had the most experienced military force in the world. By noon, 1,300 of them were dead. The camp was destroyed. The British colors had been torn down. The army that killed them had no rifles, no artillery, no cavalry in the European sense. They carried spears and cowhide shields, and they won, decisively, completely, without question. 4,000 was the chest, the force that hit the camp directly. 20,000 was the full impi. This is the story of how both numbers mattered. This is not a story about British incompetence. The commanders who died at Isandlwana were experienced, professional soldiers who made reasonable decisions based on the information they had. This is a story about what happens when one side understands the battlefield and the other side thinks they already know everything there is to know. The Zulus knew. The British didn't. The 24th Regiment of Foot was not a garrison force. It was a combat-hardened regiment that had fought in the 9th Cape Frontier War the previous year. Its soldiers were drilled in volley fire to a standard that could produce 12 aimed shots per minute from a Martini Henry rifle, a weapon accurate to 400 yards and capable of penetrating the cowhide shield that Zulu warriors carried at any combat range. The British had 2 7-pounder artillery pieces capable of firing explosive shells and canister shot. They had cavalry for reconnaissance. They had a supply chain stretching back to the coast. They had heliograph communication between columns. On paper, on every piece of paper, the British force at Isandlwana was so comprehensively superior in firepower that a direct frontal assault by any number of spear-armed warriors should have failed. The mathematics of musketry said so. Every colonial engagement in the previous century said so. When Lord Chelmsford planned the invasion of Zululand in early 1879, he did not seriously entertain the possibility that his central column could be destroyed. He planned logistics. He planned supply lines. He planned what to do after the Zulus were defeated. He did not plan for Isandlwana, because by every calculation available to him, Isandlwana was not possible. The mathematics of musketry had never met the Zulu army. The Zulu Kingdom of 1879 had been building its military system for 60 years, since Shaka Zulu redesigned African warfare from the ground up in the 1810s. The impi, the Zulu army, was not a tribal militia. It was a standing army organized into age-grade regiments, each with its own name, history, and tactical role. Young warriors spent years in barracks before being permitted to marry, channeling that energy entirely into military training and conditioning. A Zulu regiment could cover 50 miles in a day at a jogging pace, carrying its own food supply, maintaining formation discipline throughout. The primary weapon was the ikluwa, a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear designed for close combat, replacing the long-throwing assegai that Shaka had abolished because throwing your weapon meant you were now unarmed. The Zulu warrior closed distance fast, got inside the enemy's range, and used the shield as an offensive tool, hooking the enemy's shield aside to expose their sword arm before driving the ikluwa in. This was not primitive warfare. This was a military system purpose-built for a specific style of close-quarters combat, refined through decades of inter-kingdom warfare in southern Africa, and led in 1879 by Cetshwayo, a commander in his 70s who had spent 50 years studying how armies break. He knew exactly what he was going to do at Isandlwana. The British had no idea he existed.
Here is the first critical fact about Isandlwana. Lord Chelmsford had completely wrong intelligence about the Zulu army's location and intention. On the morning of January 22nd, Chelmsford received a report suggesting the main Zulu army was to the southeast, away from the camp. He took half his force and rode out to find them, leaving approximately 1,800 men to hold the camp under Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pillane. His orders to Pillane were minimal: defend the camp. Chelmsford was not a fool. He was acting on the best information available to him. The problem was that the information was wrong, generated by Zulu deception. A small decoy force had been sent specifically to draw Chelmsford away from the camp. It worked perfectly. While Chelmsford was riding southeast looking for a battle, the main Zulu impi of roughly 20,000 warriors was approaching from the north, in complete silence, having covered 12 miles since dawn. They had been spotted by accident. A British patrol had almost literally stumbled onto their position while they were resting in a ravine, trying to wait for the following day to attack. The Battle of Isandlwana was forced on both sides. Neither the British nor the Zulus had planned for it to happen on January 22nd. The Zulu plan was working so well, they almost didn't need to fight yet. At approximately 11 a.m., British cavalry scouts crested a rise to the north of the camp and found themselves looking at the entire Zulu impi, 20,000 warriors, sitting in disciplined silence in a ravine, eating their rations. For a moment, nobody moved. Then a Zulu regimental commander stood up, pointed his spear at the British scouts, and the impi rose. All 20,000 of them, at once. The scouts turned and rode back to the camp at full gallop. By the time they arrived, the dust cloud on the northern horizon was already visible. Pillane looked at it. He looked at his 1,800 men. He sent a message to Chelmsford. Report just come in that the Zulus are advancing in force, and began deploying. He extended his companies into a firing line across the plain north of the camp, approximately 1.2 miles wide. It was the correct British infantry response. A disciplined firing line, delivering coordinated volleys, was the weapon system that had broken every enemy the 24th Regiment had faced for a century. Pillane did what he had been trained to do. The British line opened fire at 800 yards. The Zulus kept coming. For the first 20 minutes, the mathematics looked like they were going to hold. 12 rounds per minute, per man, in disciplined volleys. The noise alone was described by survivors as physically disorienting. The ground in front of the British line was thick with powder smoke. Zulu warriors were falling in the chest and in the forward regiments. The advance slowed in the center. In the command tent behind the line, Pillane's officers reported the situation as difficult but stable. The line was holding. The rate of fire was holding. The ammunition was holding. None of those things would be true in 40 minutes. The horns moved. The right horn, the encircle, swept wide across the plain to the east, moving at a pace that British observers found almost impossible to believe from men who had already covered 12 miles since dawn. The left horn swung through the broken ground to the west, using the dongas, dry, rocky ravines, as cover, disappearing from the British line of sight for minutes at a time and reappearing further around. They were not running at the British line. They were running past it, around it, behind it. Pillane saw what was happening and ordered his flanking companies to turn and face the encircling movement. It was the correct response. It was also exactly what the bullhorn formation was designed to trigger. Every company that turned to face a horn was a company that stopped firing into the chest. Every gap it left in the forward line
meant the remaining companies had to spread further to cover the frontage. The line was simultaneously fighting in 3 directions, thinning by the minute, and consuming ammunition at a rate designed for a battle that was over in 20 minutes, not one that had been going for 40.
Then the ammunition problem. There is documented evidence, regimental records, survivor testimony, post-battle inquiry, that ammunition resupply slowed critically at the moment the line needed it most. The exact cause is still debated. The quartermaster's strict protocols requiring the correct unit to sign for its own ammunition, screwdrivers needed to open the reserve boxes, the sheer physical chaos of moving supply crates across a camp that was simultaneously being flanked on 2 sides. What the record shows is this. Multiple companies reported running low on rounds in the same 30-minute window. Not out, low. Enough to change the rate of fire. Enough to change the sound of the volleys from a continuous roar to something ragged, intermittent, with gaps between the cracks. Enough for the Zulu commanders watching the smoke line to hear the difference. The chest, the Isifuba, had been holding back since the battle began, absorbing the heaviest fire, losing men, waiting. This was deliberate. The chest was the anvil, not the hammer. Its job was to keep the British line facing forward and firing forward, while the horns completed the encirclement. When the volume of fire dropped, Cetshwayo gave the signal. The chest moved forward. The line broke in 3 places simultaneously. Once a line breaks, the physics of close-quarters combat change entirely. Soldiers in a formed line are a weapons system. Soldiers in a rout are individuals. The Martini-Henry rifle required a soldier to stand still, reload in sequence, aim, and fire. The Zulu iklava required a warrior to close 5 feet of distance and strike once. On a breaking battlefield, the rifle became a club. The iklava was still a spear. What followed was not a battle. It was the end of one. Isandlwana was not an ambush. It was not luck. It was the systematic application of a military doctrine that the British had never encountered and had made no preparation to counter. 3 reasons explain the outcome. First, the bullhorn formation was designed specifically to defeat firepower superiority. The chest absorbed fire and pinned the enemy in place, paying in casualties for time, which is a trade only a numerically superior force can make. The horns moved on ground the enemy was not firing at, across terrain that disrupted British cavalry observation and made accurate artillery targeting nearly impossible. By the time the horns closed behind the British line, the British were already committed, facing forward, firing forward, unable to refuse their flanks without dismantling their own formation. The bullhorn didn't just encircle the British. It forced the British to encircle themselves in the act of trying to respond to it. Every correct tactical decision Pauline made accelerated the destruction of his own line. Second, the strategic deception that preceded the battle was as sophisticated as anything in the campaign. The decoy force that drew Chelmsford southeast wasn't improvised. It was a planned operation executed at Army command level, timed to coincide with the main Impey's approach from the north. The plan was to have Chelmsford chasing ghosts to the southeast, while the camp sat at half strength facing an enemy it didn't know was there. The accidental discovery by the British patrol forced the timeline forward by a day, but the strategic objective had already been achieved. Chelmsford was 12 miles away when the battle began. He heard the artillery fire in the distance and assumed it was his own forward units. He did not turn back for 2 hours. Third, Cetshwayo Kamahole understood something about the British tactical system that Pauline did not understand about his own. The British line was strong when it was intact, stationary, and well supplied. It was fragile when it had to move, adapt, and resupply under fire simultaneously. Cetshwayo didn't design the battle to break through the British line. He designed it to make the British line break itself. Every decision Pulaine made was the correct response to the last thing that happened. The bullhorn formation made every correct response one step behind the situation it was responding to. By the time Pulaine understood what was happening, he had already done everything that needed to be done to him. The news reached London 11 days later by telegraph. The reaction was not tactical reassessment. It was disbelief, then fury, then a mobilization of reinforcements on a scale that made the original invasion force look like a scouting party. Britain sent 10,000 additional troops to Natal within weeks. Parliament was recalled. Queen Victoria demanded answers. The British press, which had covered the Zulu War as a minor colonial tidying operation, suddenly had the biggest story in the empire. 6 months later, at the Battle of Ulundi on July 4, 1879, the British returned with a force the Zulu army could not encircle. A large hollow square of infantry, artillery at the corners, cavalry waiting inside. The bullhorn formation broke against it. The Zulu capital was burned. King Cetshwayo was captured. The Zulu kingdom formally ceased to exist as an independent state. Britain got everything it had come for. Isandlwana changed nothing in the long run politically. The Zulu kingdom was absorbed, broken up, and partitioned among competing chiefs under British supervision. A deliberate strategy to ensure it could never reconstitute as a unified military force. What had taken Shaka 60 years to build was dismantled in 6 months. The battle is a footnote in British imperial history, a temporary embarrassment, an expensive lesson about not assuming, followed by an overwhelming and final response. But it is not a footnote in Zulu history. It is the day the Impi, at full strength, against the full weight of Victorian military technology, on an open battlefield in broad daylight, in a straight fight, won. Completely. Cetshwayo Kamahole was never defeated in the field. He was 70 years old at Isandlwana. He had designed a battle so well that the enemy destroyed itself trying to fight it. He commanded better on that day than anyone the British sent against him, before or after. History has largely forgotten his name. He deserves to be known. The Zulu oral tradition preserves what the written record does not. The warriors who fought at Isandlwana did not celebrate in the way European armies celebrated victories. The Zulu custom after battle required a purification ritual, the inkwala, because taking a human life, even in war, even in defense of the kingdom, carried a spiritual weight that had to be acknowledged. The men who won the most complete military victory against the British Empire in its history spent the night after the battle in ritual, not in triumph. That is not a detail that makes it into most Western accounts of Isandlwana. It should. The British response to that day was to send more soldiers. The Zulu response was to understand that Ulundi was coming, that the numbers were never going to be in their favor again, and that Isandlwana would have to be enough. It was enough. It still is.